السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا وشفينا وحبيبنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. First of all, I apologize for being late and thank you all for coming. Alhamdulillah, we got a good response. Welcome to Yaku also, who came to visit us tonight. Inshallah, as I talk, I'll try and change some of the terminologies just to accommodate Yaku, so it's easier for him to understand, inshallah. This is very relevant to the world today. When we look at the world, first of all, today is in turmoil. There's wars. The planet is under threat of destruction. The oceans are on the verge of being emptied. The earth is being infected and affected. And unfortunately, the main agent provocateur is man himself. Man is changing the nature of vegetation, is emptying the oceans in his pursuit of what he thinks is excellence, which is monetary accumulation. And Allah says in the Quran, He says, ظَهَرَ الْفَسَادُ فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِي النَّاسِ لِيُذِيقَهُمْ بَعْدَ الَّذِي مَا عَمِلُوا لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجِعُونَ. Allah says corruption has appeared on the land and on the sea because of what the hands of men have earned, in order that they may taste some of what they have earned, in order that they may return. And when we look at the Muslim world is in major crisis. Our heartlands are at war. And we're sitting with basically two extremes in the Muslim world. On the one hand, we have an understanding where people mistakenly have come to understand Islam as just conforming to certain codes of dress and maybe a few acts of ritualistic worship on the one side. And on the opposing side, we've got people that think Islam has become irrelevant to the world and needs to be either reinterpreted, or we need to readopt some of the strategies and the ways of the disbelievers in order to be successful. And Allah says, the Prophet says in the Hadith, Inna Allah la yanzuru ila suwarikum wa la ila ajsamikum. In a different Hadith to this one, وَلَكِنْ يَنْظُرُ إِلَى قُلُوبِكُمْ وَأَعْمَالِكُمْ. Allah does not look to your forms and your appearances, but what He looks at is your hearts and your deeds. And so when Muslims introspect, unfortunately today, we blame everyone but ourselves. You know, if Zuma gets rid of finance minister, it's the fault of the Zionists. If somebody misses Fajr Salah, it's the fault of the Zionists, because Hollywood made some movie that lasted longer than it's supposed to last. But really speaking, we have only ourselves to blame, because Allah has informed us that the Yahud and the Nasara will not be happy with us until we follow them. And the real guidance is the guidance of Allah. Allah says, وَلَنْ تَرْضَ عَنْكَ الْيَهُودُ وَلَا النَّصَارَى حَتَّى تَتَّبِعَ مِلَّتَهُمْ قُلْ إِنَّ هُدَى اللَّهِ هُوَ الْهُدَى. And then Allah tells us, very importantly, Allah says, إِنْ يَنْصُرْكُمُ اللَّهُ فَلَا غَالِبَ لَكُمْ. That if Allah protects you, if Allah assists you, then no one can overcome you. وَإِنْ يَخْذُلْكُمْ فَمَنْ يَنْصُرْكُمْ مِنْ بَعْدِهِ. And then if Allah wants to humiliate you, who will assist you after Him? وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَلْيَتَوَكَّلِ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. And on Allah should believers put their trust. Today we're putting it in every other contingency that's available to us, many of them haram, and then we wonder why things don't turn out the way they should turn out. If we put our trust in God, in Allah, and then all outcomes will be good. So what is it that we're all looking for? In essence, everybody is looking for a good life, for a happy life. And Allah is telling us in the Quran, He says, مَنْ عَمِلَ صَالِحًا. Whoever does good deeds, min dhakarin or untha, whether male or female, وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ, and they have to have faith, فَلَنُحْيَنَّهُ حَيَاةً طَيِّبَةً. We're going to indeed give them a good life, a wholesome life. Tayyibah, it says happy, but a wholesome life. And then Allah says, وَلَنَجْزِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْرَهُمْ, and we're going to give them their reward, بِأَحْسَنِ مَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ, according to the ihsan of their actions. So this is the ingredient now that we're looking for. That man is searching, or man searching for success and for happy lives, and Allah is saying that you're going to get this if you bring this one ingredient into your life. And then Allah says again in the Quran that the quality that He's looking for, الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. That Allah has created life and He has created death in order that He may test which of you have the most ihsan in their actions. So this is almost like the purpose that we on earth for Allah to discover this ihsan in us. And this should then be our philosophy in life. If we want to find a simple philosophy that encompasses everything that mankind should be striving towards in order to gain success and happiness in this world and the next life, and we want to reduce it into one concept, this is the concept that we should be looking for, ihsan. Now we have to go and discover what is this ihsan that we need to base our lives on. And basically, when we look at the literal word of the word hasana, which is the root of ihsan, in Arabic it means beautiful. And the opposite of this is sayyi'ah or su, which means something ugly. And Allah uses these terms. He says, "Man jaa bil hasanati falahu ashar amthaliya." Whoever comes with a good deed, he is going to get 10 more like it. And this is already giving us an idea of the power of ihsan. That it's not corresponding to our actions. That when ihsan comes into the picture, then the reward for it is exponential. And so the easiest way to turn around a deficit is to bring ihsan into the equation. Because Allah says, وَمَنْ جَاءَ بِسَيِّئَةِ فَلَا يُجْزَى إِلَّا مِثْلَهَا. And whoever does an evil deed, he only gets taken to account for that one. Now Allah is giving us a great wisdom in these two words, because what we should do is create images in our mind. When we think of a certain action, we should attach a mental picture to it. Is this beautiful or is it ugly? So picture somebody walking with, helping an old lady over the road. What picture does that give us in our mind? Is it beautiful or is it ugly? It's a beautiful picture. Now picture somebody standing and swearing someone, or beating him up on the corner. What picture does it put in your mind? It's something ugly. And so Allah is giving us this wisdom. And then look at this beautiful hadith. The Prophet ﷺ says, إِذَا سَرَتْكَ حَسَنَتُكَ. If you are pleased with your good deeds, وَسَاءَتْكَ سَيَّأَتُكَ. And if you are troubled, if you are disturbed by your bad deeds, فَأَنْتَ مُؤْمِنٌ. Then you are a believer. When you have this understanding of this beauty and this ugly in your philosophy, then you are on the path of belief. Now the literal word of the meaning ihsan in Arabic is to do something beautifully or perfectly or excellently. And Allah tells us in the Quran, الَّذِي أَحْسَنَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقَ. It is Allah who has put ihsan into everything that He has created. So when we look at everything in creation, whether man looks at himself, his work of art, his ihsan, his perfection. If you look at any part of the man, like Adil studies the eye, he'll tell you that the eye is absolute excellence. If you get somebody that studies gynecology, like Dr. Day, will get the same opinion from him. But we have channels on TV like Discovery and National Geographic that 24 hours that they are running, and all they're showing is the beauty and the ihsan that Allah has put into creation. So if human beings want to draw closer to their Creator, then they have to imbue this quality into their lifestyles. And Allah has made the human being a natural recognizer of ihsan, of beauty. We all know it. You see a nice house, you see a nice car, certain things you're not supposed to look at, but you see something good, you naturally recognize the ihsan in it. So now we should go and discuss why is it that we're looking at this topic of ihsan. And we're going to look at the beautiful hadith. This is the second hadith in Sahih Muslim. Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, he said that this hadith encompasses the entire deen. All the knowledges of deen are found in this, all the sciences of the religion are found in this one hadith. So let us look at this hadith. The Prophet, Sayyidina Umar says that the Prophet ﷺ, he narrates, he says, بينما نحن جلوس عند رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ذات يوم إذ طلع علينا رجل. We were sitting with the Prophet ﷺ one day and a man entered upon us. شديد بياض الثياب. His clothing was exceedingly white. وشديد سواد الشعر. And his hair was exceedingly black. So just like a prim and proper man. This man is in ihsan. لا يرى عليه أثر السفر. And we saw no signs of traveling on him. وَلَا يَعْرِفُ مِنَّا أَحَدٌ. And none of us recognized him. Now why this is strange? Because if you're in the desert, anyone knows now you have to travel a few hours by car to get to Medina. But in those days you'd have to travel for a week or a couple of days, and by the time you reach your destination, you're dusty and disheveled. And here's this man in immaculate stature, and the Sahaba don't recognize him, and they amazed. It says, حَتَّى إِذَا جَلَسَ إِلَى النَّبِيِّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم. So he made his way through the ranks until he sat before the Prophet ﷺ. فَأَسْنَدَ رُكْبَتَيْ إِلَى رُكْبَتَيْ. And so he put his knees against the knees of the Prophet ﷺ. وَوَدَعَ كَفَيْ عَلَى فَخِذَيْ. And so he put his palms onto the thighs of the Prophet ﷺ. And then he said, Ya Muhammad, فَأَخْبِرْنِي عَنِ الْإِسْلَامِ. He said, Oh Muhammad, tell me about what is Islam. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, he said, Al-Islamu أن تشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمد رسول الله وتقيم الصلاة وتؤتي الزكاة وتصوم رمضان وتحج البيت إن استطعت إليه سبيلا. Islam is that you testify that there is only one God, that Muhammad is the final messenger of God, that you pray the salah, you pay the zakah, you fast in Ramadan, and you perform the pilgrimage if you have the means. قال صدقت. So the man said, you spoke the truth. So Sayyidina Umar is saying, فَعَجِبْنَا لَهُ. So we were amazed at him. يَسْأَلُهُ وَيُصَدِّقُهُ. Because he questioned him and then he affirmed the answer. And then he said, فَأَخْبِرْنِي عَنِ الْإِيمَانِ. So now tell me about iman. And the Prophet ﷺ said, أَن تُؤْمِنَ بِاللَّهِ وَمَلَائِكَتِهِ وَكُتُبِهِ وَرُسُلِهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَتُؤْمِنَ بِالْقَدْرِ خَيْرِ وَالشَّرِّ. That you believe in Allah and His angels and His books and His messengers and the last day and in destiny, the good of it and the bad of it. Now when we just look at this, we find that iman is one level higher than Islam. Because another verse Allah says, قَالَتِ الْأَعْرَابُ آمَنَّا. That the desert Arabs, they said, we believe. Allah said, وَلَكِنْ قُلْ أَسْلَمْنَا. Don't say, rather say, I become Muslim. وَلَمَّا يَدْخُلِ الْإِيمَانُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. Because faith has not yet entered into your heart. So we find that iman or belief is one level higher than Islam. And then the questioner replied, he said, قَالَ صَدَقْتَ. And then he said, فَأَخْبِرْنِي عَنِ الْإِحْسَانِ. Now tell me what is this ihsan. And the Prophet ﷺ says, قَالَ أَن تَعْبُدَ اللَّهَ كَأَنَّكَ تَرَوْهُ فَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ تَرَوْهُ فَإِنَّهُ يَرَوْكَ. That you worship Allah as if you see Him, because if you don't see Him, indeed, He sees you. Now when we just look at this statement, it sounds like a very simple statement. Maybe just when you pray to Allah, you should adorn your prayers with a bit of sincerity. But we're going to look at this more deeply, inshallah. And then the man questioned, he said, قال فأخبرني عن الساعة. Now tell me about the hour. The Prophet ﷺ said, ما المسؤول عنها بأعلم من السائل. The one asking doesn't know any more than the one that's being asked. So he said, فأخبرني عن أماراتها. So okay, inform me of its signs. And the Prophet ﷺ said, أن تلد الأمة ربتها. When a slave woman gives birth to her mistress, and in another hadith of Abu Hurairah, ربها, to her master. And then he said, so that's the first sign. وَأَنْ تَرَى الْحُفَاةَ الْعُرَاةَ الْعَالَةَ رِئَاءَ الشَّاءِ يَتَطَاوَلُونَ فِي الْبُنْيَانِ. And when you see the naked, destitute, impoverished herders of sheep competing in the building of lofty towers. ثُمَّ انْطَلَقَ. And then the questioner left. فَلَبِثْتُ مَلِيًّا. So we stayed for a while. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, Ya Umar, أَتَدْرِ مَنِ السَّائِلُ? He said, oh Umar, do you know who's the questioner? And Sayyidina Umar said, قُلْتُ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ أَعْلَمُ. Allah and His Messenger know best. قال فَإِنَّهُ جِبْرِيلُ. This was Jibril, the archangel Gabriel. أَتَاكُمْ يُعَلِّمُكُمْ دِينَكُمْ. He came to teach you your deen. So who's calling this hadith deen? The Prophet ﷺ. He says he came to teach you your deen. Because all the facets of Islam are included in here. And we're talking of 3 levels of Islam. Of being Muslim, and then being mu'min, and then being muhsin. So Islam, iman, and ihsan. So when we look at this hadith, discussing 4 concepts, Islam, and then iman. So Islam is to do with the outer actions, and this is where we get our fiqh and our mu'amalat from. And then iman is the inner forms of worship. Like patience, for example. Where does patience take place? Anywhere on the body where you can see? No, it's taking place internally. Iman, yaqeen, certainty of belief, tawakkul is where? It's happening inside. And so from the iman, from studying Allah and His angels and His books and His messengers, we get usul, and we get aqidah, and we get all these sciences. And then we get from ihsan, we get tazkiyatun nufus, the purification of the souls, which is the 3rd and highest level that a believer can attain, because the Prophet ﷺ said, خَيَرُكُمْ إِيمَانًا خَيَرُكُمْ إِحْسَانًا, that the best of you in faith are those who are best in ihsan. And then the Prophet ﷺ was speaking about qiyamah. Now when we look at this 4 things that the Prophet ﷺ spoke about, the 4th one seems to be out of place, because we're talking about Islam and iman and ihsan. And how come we're talking about Qiyamah is the judgment day? Why is it we're talking about judgment day? It seems to be out of place. And the scholars gave 2 meanings or 2 wisdoms. The first wisdom, they said, is that if a man has perfected his Islam, and he perfected his iman, and he perfected his ihsan, then he's ready for judgment. He's ready now to meet Allah. And if he hasn't reached this station, especially the station of ihsan, then he's not ready for his judgment. And all of us, myself first of all, not in that category. So we're not ready. And no one's guaranteed a lease on life. So it's something we have to start working on immediately. The second wisdom is that when ihsan, when this concept of beauty becomes absent or scarce in the world, then it's the time for Qiyamah. And so we have to see now, when we're looking at these signs, whether they indicate the closeness of the hour or not. So when we look at the first sign, it says, Antalid al-amatu rabbata. When you see a woman, a female slave, give birth to her master. Now this has the first few meanings. In the early days when slavery was still a part of human society, men or rulers could get or have children with slave women, and then those slave women could give birth to children who were free men and their masters. In later times, the scholars said that women will give birth to children that will ill-treat them. They will become like the masters, and this is why the mother will be like a slave, and the child will be like the mistress. And the third wisdom is that if we don't teach our children ihsan, If we ourselves don't behave with ihsan, and then we don't teach ihsan to our children, they're not going to reciprocate that ihsan back to us. So if we want to live in a society of ihsan, of beauty, of society where people behave beautifully, then first of all, we have to be acting in a beautiful way. We have to be excelling in our character and in the way we conduct ourselves. And then we have to hand this over to our children. And we find many times parents with ihsan, but then they fail to give it over to the children. If you go and talk to the parent and say, you know, your child is maybe disturbing with this four-wheeler motorbike or whatever, say, it is burning my petrol, my fuel is being used. Well, at that point, what is it that you're teaching your child? Because with this loss of ihsan, something is going to be reciprocated to you in the future. So that's about the first sign. The second sign, Ibn Rajab says that when the hadith says the destitute, naked, barefoot herders of sheep, he says these will be people that will just come all of a sudden into money. And the result is they will mistreat those that are under them, A, and B, they will squander money lavishly. And another hadith, the Sahaba asked the Prophet ﷺ, said, who are these men? He said, they're the Arabs. Now today when you go and find where's the tallest building, you find it in an Arab land. Where's the next one being built? We'll find it in an Arab land. Now, the first thought is to think, okay, about these Arabs and say they're the ones that are misguided. But the lessons are for us. What is the mistake that they've made? They have come to regard material acquisition as ihsan. That the building of buildings and the owning of gold cars and silver cars and titanium vehicles, we see it all the time. This is what they come to confuse as ihsan. And they lose the real understanding of ihsan. And while we can look at them, you know, as the epitome of this example, we find that prevalent in all of us. How many of us wouldn't like to go and live in one of these lands or aspire to go to these places? Not that there's anything wrong, but we should understand what Allah is requiring from us. And if we come back to our situation here, we can find the similar tendencies, all right? And so we'll just look at, our famous president.
If you listen to our good friends, the opposition, I'm telling you, you can think you live in another world. You know, some people who could not pronounce Kanja, they've now learned Kanja, Kanja, Kanja. Even if you tell them the Kanja report is being processed, is going to come. I mean, 3 investigations have been made. Nkandla, even if we are discussing very serious matters, a man stand up, point of order. Yes, Nkandla. Tiggs was a George Cook. Hey. That's part of the problem. Again, it emphasizes the poverty of politics in our opposition parties. I can't remember, you know, part of the reason I can't deal with all the contributions. I'm dealing with contributions that were very meaningful. Because others, there was nothing said. There is a broken president in a broken country, you know, my babu.
So that's just on a lighter note. But what's the point I want us to understand here? Is that even here in our country where we have abject poverty, we have a man that's regarding his own personal house as something of ihsan, and is willing to take the money from the people in order to acquire it. Why? Because we have misunderstood what is the beauty and the excellence of the world. So when we look at this example of the Arabs competing in buildings, that could be the head of state of another country, it could be the owner of a business, it could be a man in his house, but all suffering from the same illness. So now that we understand what is ihsan, we're going to look at the way how we can achieve this ihsan. Remember we said, the hadith said, أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم تكن تراه فإنه يراك. That you worship Allah as if you see Him, because if you don't see Him, He sees you. And we said that sounds very simple, but what we're going to now look at is a few lessons from quantum physics to understand what does it mean when Allah is observing us. Because when we understand the power that Allah exercises over the universe, the overwhelming power, then we will see the power of this, or appreciate the power of this statement. Now, first of all, let me just qualify this. We don't need science to justify our pursuit of the religion. The Quran and the Sunnah we regard as two immutable truths. And while the different strategies we may use may change from time to time, the Quran and the Sunnah, those are the absolute truths. But this is some strategy or some means that is affirmed by the Quran. Because we see from the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, وَإِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ وَرَبِّي أَرِنِي كَيْفَ تُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى. And when Abraham said to his Lord, "Oh my Lord, show me how you give life to the dead." Allah said, قَالَ أَوَلَمْ تُؤْمِنْ. Don't you believe? قَالَ بَلَى. He said, indeed I do believe. وَلَكِنْ لِيَطْمَئِنَّ قَلْبِي. But I want to strengthen this heart of mine. So we use these things only as a tonic to strengthen our hearts and to motivate us into action. And a believer that knows is better than a believer that doesn't know. The Prophet ﷺ says, الْمُؤْمِنُ قَوِيُّ خَيْرٌ وَحَبُّ إِلَى اللَّهِ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِ الضَّعِيفِ وَفِي كُلٍّ خَيْرٌ. That the strong believer is better than the weak believer, but in both of them there's good. So we're going back to our old quantum video, but what I'm going to do this time is take a bit of time to explain it to you. Now in quantum physics, what basically happens is they fire a particle out of a particle emitter, and they fire it towards one slit in a screen. And when they fire it towards the one slit, it goes through the one slit. And that sounds simple, it's like throwing a ball through a hole. But when they make the second slit, this is where things start to change. Somehow it seems that that single particle became a wave and went through both. And instead of putting a single band on the back wall, it puts a multiple layer of bands, which would indicate that it went through both holes at the same time, interfered with itself, and created what we call an interference pattern at the back. What is still stranger is that when the scientists put the detector to see which hole exactly it's going through, it started going through only one. Almost as if this particle could detect that it was being watched. So two things to take into account when you watch it. Number one, when we make the second slit, it's almost as if that particle knows that you want it to go through the second slit. So it's somehow tying into the intention or into the thought process of the human being. Second of all, it has conscious and intuition, because when it detects the detector, then it goes back to behaving like a particle. Now this has many implications for us moving forward. I just want us to understand this concept, because it sounds very abstract, I'm sure, Dr. Saleh. It sounds like science fiction, but let's watch it.
And here we are, the granddaddy of all quantum weirdness, the infamous double slit experiment. To understand this experiment, we first need to see how particles, or little balls of matter, act. If we randomly shoot a small object, say a marble, at the screen, we see a pattern on the back wall where they went through the slit and hit. Now, if we add a second slit, we would expect to see a second band duplicated to the right. Now, let's look at waves. The waves hit the slit and radiate out, striking the back wall with the most intensity directly in line with the slit. The line of brightness on the back screen shows that intensity. This is similar to the line the marbles make. But when we add the second slit, something different happens. If the top of one wave meets the bottom of another wave, they cancel each other out. So now there is an interference pattern on the back wall. Places where the two tops meet are the highest intensity, the bright lines, and where they cancel, there is nothing. So, when we throw things, that is, matter, through two slits, we get this, two bands of hits. And with waves, we get an interference pattern of many bands. Good so far. Now, let's go quantum. An electron is a tiny, tiny bit of matter, like a tiny marble. Let's fire a stream through one slit. It behaves just like the marble, a single band. So, if we shoot these tiny bits through two slits, we should get, like the marbles, two bands. What? An interference pattern. We fired electrons, tiny bits of matter through. But we get a pattern like waves, not like little marbles. How? How could pieces of matter create an interference pattern like a wave? It doesn't make sense. But physicists are clever. They thought, maybe those little balls are bouncing off each other and creating that pattern. So, they decide to shoot electrons through one at a time. There is no way they could interfere with each other. But after an hour of this, the same interference pattern is seen to emerge. The conclusion is inescapable. The single electron leaves as a particle, becomes a wave of potentials, goes through both slits, and interferes with itself to hit the wall like a particle. But mathematically, it's even stranger. It goes through both slits, and it goes through neither. And it goes through just one, and it goes through just the other. All of these possibilities are in superposition with each other. But physicists were completely baffled by this. So they decided to peek and see which slit it actually goes through. They put a measuring device by one slit to see which one it went through and let it fly. But the quantum world is far more mysterious than they could have imagined. When they observed, the electron went back to behaving like a little marble. It produced a pattern of two bands, not an interference pattern of many. The very act of measuring or observing which slit it went through meant it only went through one, not both. The electron decided to act differently, as though it was aware it was being watched. And it was here that physicists stepped forever into the strange, never world of quantum events. What is matter? Marbles or waves? And waves of what? And what does an observer have to do with any of this? The observer collapsed the wave function simply by observing.
Okay, now let me explain this to you. First of all, when we look at that experiment, like we said earlier, when they put the second slit, somehow it seems that that particle detected the intent that we wanted it to go through both, and so it went through both slits. That's the first important thing. The second thing is that when we put the detector there, it went back to going through as a particle. So what it means is, when something is being observed, then it's in particle form. Now, what is particle form? Everything that we can see and touch is in particle form. The stars, the sun, the galaxies, every single thing that we can see and touch and feel is in particle form. So what does this mean then? What it really means is that every single thing that is in existence only exists because there's one super conscious observer that's observing it. And if that observer is not to observe, it can't exist. And so the quantum physicists, they came up with a whole lot of outrageous ideas. We'll get to them just now. But let's just look at the Quran. Because this is the power of this verse. Allah says, سَنُرِيمْ آيَاتِنَا. And indeed, we're going to show them our signs. فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ. In themselves and the horizon. حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقِّ. Until it becomes clear to them that this is the truth. And this is the powerful part of this verse. أَوَلَمْ يَكْفِي بِرَبِّكَ أَنَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ شَهِيدٍ. Is it not sufficient for you that Allah is witnessing everything? It means every single thing is only existing in particle form because Allah is observing it. And there's a beautiful hadith in Sahih Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ says about Allah, he says, حِجَابُهُ نُورٌ, that his veil is light. لَوْ كَشَفَهُ, if he was to remove it, لَأَحْرَقَتْ سُبُحَاتُ وَجْهِ مَنْتَهَا إِلَيْهِ بَصَرُهُ مِنْ خَلْقِهِ. If he was to remove this veil, the splendor of his countenance would destroy everything in creation as far as his sight reaches. So what this hadith is giving us the understanding that everything is only existing because it's being observed by Allah. And if he stops his observation, everything will cease to exist. So that's the first powerful thing now to understand, is that everything is existing only because it's being observed. Now, each one here should ask themselves, what does that mean? It means every moment of your life, the fact that you exist and you're breathing, means you're being watched. Let's go back to that. What is ihsan? That you worship Allah as if He sees you. And this is the power of Allah's observing. Now the quantum physicists, they came out with theories, and they said, no, man is the observer. They came out with a theory, they called it Copenhagen interpretation, and they said, no, this was Niels Bohr, the father of quantum physics, that man is the observer. Because we see that when man makes the second slit, the subatomic particle responds to his thought. So they said, we the observers. Okay? But this, first of all, not consistent with the Quran. Allah says, لَوْ كَانَ فِيهِمَا آلِيَةٌ إِلَّا اللَّهُ لَفَسَدَتَ. If there were gods besides God, then there will be corruption on the earth. Because one will want it to rain, one will want it to be sunny, whose law will prevail. But the one thing that they forget, conveniently, is that if this world functions on this particular reality, what it implies is that the observer had to have been here before the world came into existence. And man appeared billions of years after the universe started. So who was observing in the meantime? That means there was some absent or some observer who packed up and left. So they're not coming forward with viable propositions. But let's look at the Quran, what it says. It says, Huwa al-awwal. He's the first. Meaning he predates existence. Huwa al-akhir. And he'll be here at the end of creation. Huwa al-dhahir. Allah is above all things. Huwa al-batinu. Look at the power of this verse. And he's the knower of hidden things. Wa huwa bi kulli shay'in alim. And he knows all things. Look at the power of this verse of the Quran. So what we have to understand now is that before any movement takes place in the subatomic world, it has to take permission from Allah. Because what we can then say, if we then say everything is in Allah or in God's control, that means all the evil actions I do is what He predestined me to do. So I can't be accountable. And then there shouldn't be a heaven and a hell. Because I was predestined to do it, almost like a robot. So what we have to understand is how the quantum world works according to the Quranic explanation or the Quranic worldview. And basically when we understand that Allah is the observer, we have to understand that every single thing first has to take His permission before it can come into existence. But because Allah has given Him the ability to program into the subatomic world, He becomes responsible for His actions. So if we look at the first verse, Allah says, مَا أَصَابَ مِن مُصِيبَةٍ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ, that nothing can happen except if Allah permits it. So now we know that every single particle in the world or in existence is under the control of Allah. And then Allah says, وَمَا أَصَابَكُم مِّن مُّصِيبَةٍ فَبِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِيكُم, but there isn't anything that afflicted you except it's what your hands have earned. Meaning this is what you programmed into the subatomic particle. Now let me just explain to you, I'm talking of subatomic particles, what it is. Basically, if we look at anything in existence, if you look at my phone, this phone is made up of molecules, and these molecules are made up of atoms, and these atoms are made up, or what differentiates one from another is electrons, and the energy inside the electrons are photons. And this experiment that we watched has been done with photons, it has been done with electrons, it has been done with atoms and molecules at a certain scale, and all of them exhibit the same the results. So what it really means is that we have the ability to affect the fundamental building blocks that form matter. Okay? And so when we program into something, we actually affect the composition of that object of matter. And then there's another verse, we're going to discuss the relevance of this later. Allah says, مَا أَصَوْبَ مِن مُصِيبَةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا فِي أَنفُسِكُمْ, that nothing happens in the earth and in yourselves or afflicts you, إِلَّا فِي كِتَابٍ مِن قَبْلِ أَن نَبْرَأَهَا, except it's written in a book before it happens. وَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ عَلَى اللَّهِ يَسِيرٌ, and that's easy for Allah. And that sounds a bit far-fetched, that how does something get written and recorded before it happens? It defies logic. But we're going to get to that shortly. What we have to understand now, the fact that our intent can affect this particle, and the particle in essence is energy. And what is flowing from our minds or from our hearts, depending where we describe cognition to be, is light flowing through those particles. So what we have to understand is that our intentions are actually transmitted with light, because your brain works on electricity, and electricity is part of the electromagnetic spectrum, so it's light. And so this energy is affecting the energy in the particle. And when we understand this has to change the way we look at the world, because it means that our intent can affect everything. It can affect the food we eat, the clothes we wear, our children. It can affect every cell in our body. And so man has to now become aware of every single thought. The Prophet says, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, that every action is according to its intention. And Imam al-Shafi'i said this contains 1/3 of the deen, because this is so important. And the Prophet says in the hadith, he says, نِيَّةُ رَجُلِ أَبْلَغَ مِنْ عَمَلِهِ, that the intention of a man will get him further than his actions. So we'll just look at a short video.
A different experiment involved the use of random event generators, also known as REGs. These are small and simple computers that produce random sequences of ones and zeros. After being told to focus on either producing more ones or zeros, the participants in the study were clearly able to influence the outcome and manipulate the mathematical probability of generating the result they intended to achieve. In a follow-up study, participants were told to once again bring about more ones or zeros on REGs located on the opposite sides of the planet. The results were equally consistent. Further studies also revealed that the results were strengthened when more people concentrated their thoughts together on the same outcome. An ongoing study started in 1998 called the Global Consciousness Project uses REGs that are situated around the world and kept in electromagnetically shielded housings to avoid external disturbances.
So basically what we're seeing from this experiment is that human thought, a random event generator, is something that works with light, is electronic, and the human mind has an effect on it. Not only that, we're seeing that it has an effect on somebody on another continent. And the more people we add to the equation, the more effective the concentrated thought. And we can get an understanding of that from Jama'ah. This is why we have to pray in Jama'ah, because of the power. For the ladies, they get that coherency, whether they at home or in the mosque. But the men, if they want the power of that coherency, they have to come to a collective. And if we understand the power of thought, if we all start thinking in a similar way, share similar understandings, then we have an effect, physical effect in the world. The next thing we have to look at is interference. Basically, what this means is that when we put the detector off, then the particle goes through both holes. And when we want to look at it, it only goes through one. So interference occurs when we believe in it without wanting to see. It means when you have faith that something will happen, then the world works differently. But when you want to test it, then it doesn't work that way. So for example, if Allah says that if you pay 10, you're going to get 20 back, if you believe in it, interference will happen, the 20 will come back. But if you want to see it coming back, or if you look at it and say, but it's impossible, if I got 20 and I give 10 away, I only got 10, then that's the reality that's going to exist for you. And this is why Allah says, الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. So Allah says, Alif Lam Mim, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. Guidance for the people of taqwa. Who are they? الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. They believe in what they can't see. And so what we're understanding from the quantum world is that the unseen world is not some distant dimension. It's a world that's functioning parallel to our reality. Now in quantum physics, the physicists, they can't tell you where the position or the exact location of a particle is, because every time they try to measure it, they change it. It changes, so they call this the uncertainty principle. And another terminology they use is superposition, because they say a thing is in many different places before man makes his selection. And so what they say is reality doesn't exist if we not looking at it. But this is not consistent even with common sense, because if I take a seed and I put it into the ground, no one's looking at it, but it grows. And Allah says, وَعِنْدَهُ مَفَاتِحُ الْغَيْبِ. Only with Him is the keys to the unseen. لَا يَعْلَمُهَا إِلَّا هُ. No one knows it except Him. وَيَعْلَمُ مَا فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ. And He knows what is on the land and in the sea. وَمَا تَسْقُطُ مِنْ وَرَقَةٍ إِلَّا يَعْلَمُهَا. And not even a leaf falls except Allah knows it. وَلَا حَبَّةٍ فِي ظُلُمَاتِ الْأَرْضِ. And not even a seed in the darkness of the earth. وَلَا رَبٍّ وَلَا يَابِسٍ إِلَّا فِي كِتَابٍ مُبِينٍ. And not something ripe or dry except it's in a clear book. So what we're starting to get an understanding is the comprehensiveness of Allah's knowledge and His control over the world. Now we're going to look at something that's really amazing. It takes a bit of getting used to. And this is called the time erasing theory.
However, the double hole experiment's mind-boggling conclusions don't end there. In recent years, technology has allowed scientists to perform a fascinating variation of the test. Its results call into question our perception of time itself.
This is like a high-tech version of the double hole experiment. Electrons are being fired toward a barrier with two holes in it. But the scientists can delay their decision about whether to observe the electrons until after they've passed through the holes, but before they hit the screen. It's as though I'm on a baseball field, and there's a baseball being pitched toward the barrier with the holes in it. But my eyes are closed, so it goes through, and it behaves like a wave, but then at the last second before it hits the screen, I open my eyes and decide to observe it.
At that moment, the electrons, in essence, become particles, and seemingly always were particles from the time they left the electron gun.
So it's as though they went back in time to before they went through the holes and decided to go through one or the other, not through both as they would have had they been behaving like waves. That's really crazy.
That's the enigma. That our choice of what experiment to do determines the prior state of the electron. Somehow or other, we've had an influence on it which appears to travel backwards in time.
So this is the first one. It's called the time reversal theory. And we're going to discuss it from the Quranic perspective after this. And just to show you quickly the second one, which is called the quantum eraser theory, which is even a bit more amazing than this one.
The experiment begins in the top left corner with the laser.
I just want to explain something to you quickly here about this thing. It's a bit complicated and technical, but once you get it, it's quite easy. Basically, if we're looking at where the laser is at the back there, we're still firing a particle. And when you look at this triangle, you're looking at the triangle at the front of that small rectangle there. That triangle is basically splitting the photon into two. And when it splits it into two, you can see it's directing it to different detectors. So we got there D0 and D4 and D2. And further down, when I maximize the screen, you'll see a few other detectors. So basically what's happening is when it moves to a detector and we can see the path, we can determine what the path is, then it registers what we call a particle, two bands. And when we deflect the beams, now if you look at these green lines, those are beam splitters, and basically this is like a half silvered mirror. If we take a mirror like this and only silver this part, that means this part of the mirror can reflect and the other one can let things through. So when they fire the particles towards these beam splitters, some of them will be deflected and others will go through. So when they arrive at the detector and we can't tell which emitter it came from, where the source was, then basically the interference pattern returns. Let me show it to you and then I explain it again after that, inshallah.
Firing two entangled photons, either through slit A or slit B. Now it is truly random which slit it will fire through. And because we have no measuring device at either slit, we cannot know which slit the laser fires through until they pass through and are detected on the other side. So at each firing, it will either go through A or B. Now the first prism splits the entangled photon.
This is how it works. When two subatomic particles interact, they can become entangled. That means their spin, position, or other properties become linked through a process unknown to modern science.
If you then make a measurement of one of the particles, then that instantaneously determines what the behavior of the other particle should be. And when the experiment is done, it's found that indeed the other particle's quantum state is exactly determined once you've made a measurement of the partner particle's quantum state.
Now the first prism splits the entangled photons and sends them in different directions. The top one goes to detector 0. Now if the photons only hit D0, we don't know the path information, since when the photon arrives, it could have either come from path A or path B. So because we don't know...
So let me just pause there. What he's saying basically is that if they fire the photons and they come on two paths, say one from A and one from B, but they both end at D0, we're not sure which one it is that arrived there. Is it the one from A or is it the one from B? As long as we don't have knowledge, the pattern is going to be that band of stripes.
Path information, it should produce an interference pattern if it only came here. If we could place a measuring device at the slit, we would know the path information. But with just a result from D0, we don't know the path information. So because of the lack of knowledge we would have about the system, the particle would act in a way as if it goes through both, becoming the wave of possibilities it could have been, instead of one of these possibilities, if we knew the definite path information. But the other entangled photon goes the other way, and because it is entangled, it will affect the result of its twin that went to D0. Now the other photon from either A or B goes through the prism and hits either BSA or BSB. At both of these, there is a 50-50 chance it will either pass through or bounce off and go to either D4 or D3. Now if the photon hits either one of these detectors, notice what happens. We obtain which path information, because the only way the photon could hit D3 is if it came out of B, and the only way it could hit D4 is if it came out of A. There is no way a photon that came out of B could hit D4 and vice versa. So if a photon hits D3 or D4, we will know the path information it took, and we will get a clump pattern. Now if the photon randomly passes through BSA or BSB, it will either bounce off here or here, and it has a 50-50 chance of passing through BSC or bouncing off of it. So if the photon passes through BSA or BSB, we lose the path information. Because if it hits D1 or D2, it could either have come from A or B. We can't ever trace the path information back to A or B. So when they hit D1 or D2, we should get an interference pattern, demonstrating the photon went through both slits, since we don't have definite path information. Now here is one of the important implications of this experiment about what is causing collapse. Some argue physical interaction from the detector is what is causing the collapse. But if that was the case, D1 and D2 should cause collapse every time. But that is not what happens. If a photon makes it to D1 or D2, they always display an interference pattern. Yet every time a photon hits D3 or D4, a clump pattern is formed. But the only difference is what we, the observers, know about these two stations. Because of the experiment setup, we know that if a photon hits D3, it will always be a clump pattern, showing the photon only went through one slit. If it hits D1, we know it will always be an interference pattern, showing that the photon acted in a way as if it went through both slits. But the only difference between these two is what we, the conscious observer, knows about the system. Our knowledge of the system causes different results in how the photon will act. If it was all random and not caused by our knowledge, we should get some clump patterns at D1 and some interference patterns at D3. But that is not what the experiment shows. We always get a clump pattern at D3 and D4 because whenever a photon hits here, we always know the path information. And we always will get an interference pattern at D1 and D2 because we can never know the actual path information. So the photon acts in a way as if it goes through both. Whereas at D3 and D4, the photon only goes through one slit because we know the path information. The particles act in a way that correlates to our knowledge. See, what causes collapse is knowledge, and knowledge requires a knower. Sir Rudolph Peter said, the moment at which you can throw away one possibility and keep only the other is when you finally become conscious of the fact that the experiment has given one result. You see, the quantum mechanical descriptions is in terms of knowledge, and knowledge requires somebody who knows. Now the other implication is even more mind-boggling.
So let's just look at what they basically say, is that the observer, apart from just observing, has to have knowledge also. Okay? If we, for example, if we take a child can't witness a contract because they can be looking but they don't have the understanding of the knowledge of the content. But in this case, the super observer is not only observing, but has to have knowledge, intimate knowledge or complete knowledge of what he's observing. So what this basically means is that everything is in particle form only because it's being observed by Allah, but not just being observed. Every single thing about every single particle has to be known. If there's no knowledge, it can't exist in particle form. So Allah has complete knowledge about everything that He's observing. Now the last part we're just going to see here quickly is that these two photons, although they entangled, meaning whatever happens to the one has to happen to the other one, its twin pair will reach the detector before the other one. Okay? Let me just show that quickly to you slowly.
The photon knew before.
So let's just look here. If we're looking at this photon, one came down this way. So if we're looking at, let me just show you here quickly. If these two photons came out from this point here, this one hits the detector before this one. But the pattern that this one will make will be exactly corresponding to this one. Which means that the first photon has to have knowledge before time of what the second one is going to do. Otherwise, it can't have the corresponding message. Understand that? So, the first particle has knowledge in advance. Remember the verse we looked at? That nothing happens. Okay? وَمَا أَصَابَكُم مِّن مُّصِيبَةٍ إِلَّا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا فِي أَنفُسِكُمْ إِلَّا فِي كِتَابٍ قَبْلَ أَن نَّبْرَهَا. Except that it's in a book before it happens. وَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ عَلَى اللَّهِ يَسِيرٌ. And that is easy for Allah. So, this experiment in essence is teaching us two things. Is that one, that the observer has to have full knowledge of what he's observing, and the fact that you and I are in particle form means that the observer knows every single thing that there is to know about us. Nothing escapes his knowledge. A. And B, his knowledge is so complete that he even knows things before they're going to happen. And quantum physics is proving that that is a reality you see in the experiment. We're not talking about some science fiction. All right?
Where it would end up. How do we know this? Because of how its twin acts at T0. The twin photon registers at T0 before its entangled twin ends up at a detector. And whatever registers at D0 always correlates to wherever its twin ends up. So if the twin hits D3 or D4, D0 always registers a clump pattern to correlate, and always an interference pattern if its twin lands at D1 or D2.
I don't understand it. I don't know that anyone does.
Okay, so now we go back to that verse that we said, سَنُرِيمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ. And indeed we will show them our signs in the horizons and in themselves, حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقِّ. Until it becomes clear to them that this is the truth. And now Allah says, أَوَلَمْ يَكْفِي بِرَبِّكَ أَنَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ شَهِيدٌ. Look at the word Allah is using. He could have said basir. Alright? That Allah is seeing everything. But Allah is using the word shaheed, meaning witnessing. Which means what? I'm looking and I have knowledge. Then only you can be a witness. So I can be sitting at Umhlanga beach, I cannot say it is a holiday time, and you look at the ship there, and the ship doesn't exist only because you're looking at it. You will have to have knowledge of everything happening in the ship if you're the observer. And this is the power now of the Quran. Now let's look at this next verse. Allah says, "La tudrikul absar." Vision cannot grasp it. Wa huwa yudrikul absar, but He encompasses all vision. Let's look at the power of this. And look what Allah says next. Wa huwa latif. Now latif in Arabic means subtle. And one of the problems quantum physicists have, they call it the problem of measurement. Because they say in order to make a measurement in the quantum world, you need such subtle instrumentation so as to not disturb the particle. And Allah is saying, وَهُوَ اللَّطِيف. And He is subtle. Okay? And then He says, khabir. And He's acquainted with all things. See the power we said that the knower has to know. So the one that's observing, the one that has complete vision, he has to be subtle and he has to be fully acquainted with everything. And so we learn from this that time and essence of all matter is in the control of Allah. Allah's power is absolutely complete. If we look at this verse now in the Quran, I want you to think of it in terms of wave and particle. Allah says in the Quran, it says, "O kalladhi mara ala qaryatin wa hiya khawiyatun ala urushiha." Or like a man that passed by a town and it has tumbled down on its roofs. It says, "Qala anna yuhyi hadhihi law ba'da mawtiha." So this man said, how will Allah give life to this, after its death? فَأَمَاتَهُ مِئَةَ عَامٍ ثُمَّ بَعْثَ. So Allah says, so we caused him to die for 100 years and then we raised him up. قَالَ كَمْ لَبِثْتَ قَالَ لَبِثْتُ يَوْمًا أَوْ بَعْدَ يَوْمٍ. It was asked to him, how long did you remain dead or asleep? He said a day or part of a day. قال بل لبثت 100 عام. But you've been dead for 100 years, Allah says. Now, very important. فَانْظُرْ إِلَىٰ طَعَامِكَ وَشَرَابِكَ لَمْ يَتَسَنَّ. Now look at your food and your drink. They haven't changed. Now when will a thing not change? When it's in wave form. Because a wave is not bound by space and time. You see? How will a thing last? Because the first thing that goes off is food. Alright? The women will tell you the first thing that goes off is food. And this food is lasting for 100 years and hasn't changed. It's to exist in wave form. And then Allah says, وَانْظُرْ إِلَى حِمَارِكَ. Now look at your donkey. Why? Because the donkey was decomposed, was into bones. That means the donkey was in particle form. Allah says, وَلِنَجْعَلَكَ آيَةً لِلنَّاسِ. So that we can make this as a sign for mankind. And this is what we're discussing today, the science. Then Allah says, وَانْظُرْ إِلَى الْعِظَامِ. Now look at the bones. كَيْفَ نُنْشِزُهَا. How we gather them. ثُمَّ نَكْسُوهَا لَحْمًا. And then we clothe them with flesh. فَلَمَّا تَبَيَّنُوا قَالَ أَعْلَمُ أَنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. And when it became clear to this man, then he said, indeed I know that God is able to do all things. So when we understand this, what should it lead us to? If everything is in the control of Allah, should tawakkul not only be with Allah? Allah says, وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. Whoever puts his taqwa in Allah, Allah is sufficient for him. وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبْ. And he'll provide for him from sources he didn't know existed. وَمَن يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. And if you put your trust in God, He will be sufficient for you because everything is in His control. So Allah is controlling. If we look at each one, a human being is made up of 7 million trillion atoms. Okay? And so Allah is not in control of Mr. Kesem as a human. Each of the 7 million trillion atoms, each of the electrons, maybe the 50 million trillion electrons in those atoms, and maybe the 100 million trillion photons inside of him, Allah is controlling all of those things. This is the extent of the control that God, Allah, has over the universe. Now let's look at Allah says, وَمَا تَكُونُ فِي شَأْنٍ. It doesn't matter what you're busy doing with, or busy with. وَمَا تَتْلُ مِنُّ مِنْ قُرْآنٍ. Or what portion of the Quran you are reciting. وَلَا تَعْمَلُونَ مِنْ عَمَلٍ. Or what affair you're busy with. إِلَّا كُنَّا شُهُودًا عَلَيْكُمْ إِذْ تُفِيدُونَ فِيهِ. Except we witnesses over it when you're doing it. Now listen to this powerful part. Allah says, وَمَا يَعْزُبُ عَلَى رَبِّكَ مِنْ مِثْقَالِ ذَرَةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا فِي السَّمَاءِ. And nothing escapes from your Lord, even the weight of an atom in the earth and the heavens. And this is a miracle because only 100 years ago scientists discovered that the atom had a weight. وَلَا أَصْغَرَ مِنْ ذَلِكَ وَلَا أَكْبَرَ. Or something smaller or bigger. And only 100 years ago, Neil Rutherford found out that there's something smaller inside the atom. إِلَّا فِي كِتَابٍ مُبِينٍ. Except it's in a clear register. That means those smallest things. Not only does Allah know it, it's recorded. You know, if you are a businessman and you have lots of stock but you don't know what you have, you may be a successful businessman but not efficient. But the one that has a lot of stock and everything is on computer and has its place, that's an efficient businessman. So Allah doesn't know about it. Not only does He know about each particle, but each thing is in a register. And so Allah says, Allah, inna awliya Allah la khawfun alayhim wa lahum yahzanun. That the people that have this understanding, they are the friends of Allah. And we look at something else powerful in the quantum world. If we understand that Allah is controlling every single particle, when Allah wants to command something, He commands each particle separately. See, if I want to make a cup of tea, I must first take water and put it into a kettle and boil it and then put the tea bag and pour the tea. It's a process. But if I controlled each particle that makes up the tea, I could command each of them separately and then they would all obey instantly and I have my cup of tea. And this is what Allah is saying, إِنَّمَا أَمْرُهُ إِذَا أَرَادَ شَيْئًا أَن يَقُولَ لَهُ كُن فَيَكُونَ. When Allah commands something, He just says to it, be, and it is. And what we'll just look, this is a 48-second video, is to just show you what happened in the first second of the universe. Because when the universe was forming, Allah gives command to each particle. So each particle went and did its thing instantly. And so what happened in the first portion of the second was greater than what has happened in the 13.8 billion years that has followed. Imagine in one command.
The most momentous second in history, the first.
In that first moment of creation, in the first second, space and time, matter and energy, everything was set into motion.
Space and time burst into existence, giving birth to the universe.
More things happened in that first second than will probably happen in the entire future history of the universe, no matter how long it lives.
This violent first second will define everything, including you.
So that very first second, understanding that is the key to understanding the universe itself.
So when we understand this, we should only seek assistance from Allah. And now we can understand from the previous experiment why Allah knows things before they happen. And just one more thing, if we understand from this experiment that the subatomic particle possesses consciousness, intelligence, and information, then we can understand this verse of the Quran, تُسَبِّحُ لَهُ السَّمَاوَاتُ سَبْعُ وَالْأَرْضُ وَمَنْ فِيهِنْ. That first of all, the heavens and the earth, because it's made up of matter. وَمَنْ فِيهِنْ, and all that is in it. وَإِن مِّن شَيْءٍ إِلَّا يُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِهِ. And there's not a single thing in it except it glorifies Allah. وَلَكِنْ لَا تَفْقَهُونَ تَسْبِيحَهُ. But we don't understand its glorification. إِنَّهُ كَانَ حَلِيمًا غَفُورًا. And God is ever forbearing, most forgiving. So these subatomic particles have consciousness and they are all glorifying God, Allah, and each one of them is affected by our thoughts and our actions. And if we just look at this, the indisputable nature of prophethood, if we understand this, that Allah knows everything in advance, then we have to understand that the messengers that He sent with the men that He knew were not going to change the message. And this is what Allah is saying, مَا كَانَ لِبَشَرٍ أَن يُؤْتِيَهُ اللَّهُ كِتَابَ وَالْحُكْمَ وَالنُّبُوَّةِ. And it's not possible that Allah gives a man the book and the wisdom and the prophethood, and then He says, be a servant of me and not Allah. These men that Allah has sent are tested by the knowledge of Allah, and this is why He has sent them. I think that's the last. So we're going to end here now. And there's two parts left which we'll carry on, inshallah. When is the time for ihsan, and who is ihsan beneficial for? Just because it's holiday, we're just going to take one lesson with it. The time for ihsan is all the time. There is no off time. Why? Because there is no time that Allah is not observing and Allah doesn't have knowledge of what we're saying or doing. So if we have that understanding, how is it then that we can do things that will be displeasing to Him? So it means every single wakeful moment we should be guarding our thoughts and our speech and our actions. And who is it beneficial for? It's beneficial only for ourselves. Jazakallah.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم انصر الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم انصر الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم اسقنا اللهم اغثنا اللهم اسقنا الغيث ولا تجعلنا من القانتين. اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام. تباركت يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.